Be'ezus Hashem. Today's daf is Masechta Bava Kamma daf Lamed Beis, and we will begin from daf Lamed Aleph Lamed Beis by the Mishnah. So let me zoom in here. Okay, Mishnah says Zeh ba b'chavisai. There are two people walking on the opposite side of the street, and one was coming with a chavis, a barrel. Zeh ba b'kairasai, and this one was coming with a crossbeam. A big crossbeam. Nishbara kadoy shazeh v'karasa shazeh, and they got into an accident. Each one was walking, didn't see each other, and the barrel, even though it calls it kadoy and over here chavias, the words are used interchangeably. So the barrel got broken through the crossbeam of this one. Potter, nobody is liable to pay. Shalazel rishus lahalech, lazel rishus lahalech. Each one has the right to be in the rishus harabim. So nobody did anything wrong. Now, let's say they were going on the same side of the street, and the person with the beam was walking first. The person with the barrel was walking behind him. And the person with the barrel started speeding up and banged into the kaira. The barrel got broken through the person carrying the crossbeam. Potter balakara, the one who's carrying the crossbeam, is not liable to pay because he did it for himself. The chavias sped up; he was mazik himself. You go to Lamed Beis Amud Aleph, but says the Mishnah, not in all cases. Im Omed Bal Hakora, if the one carrying the crossbeam stopped for a moment, a short stop, chayev, then he's chayev to pay for the barrel if the barrel banged into him, if the barrel rear-ended him. But if he warned the one carrying the barrel, hey, stop, Potter, he's Potter, not obligated to pay because he sent out a warning. He flashed his lights, don't come here. So therefore, if an accident happened, then the balakor is not liable to pay. Now the Gemara or the Mishnah reverses the case. The person carrying the barrel was first, and the person carrying the crossbeam was last. And the barrel got broken by the crossbeam. Chayev. So then the crossbeam is obligated to pay because he sped up and banged into the guy carrying the barrel. He was going too fast. But if the guy who's carrying the barrel in front made a sudden stop, Potter, then the guy carrying the beam is not liable to pay. But if the guy carrying the barrel said, hey, I stopped, and he told out to the guy carrying the crossbeam, stop, chayev, then if the crossbeam guy continues on and causes damage to the barrel, he's chayev to pay. Hey, this would be hold true in another situation. One guy is carrying a candle, someone was carrying flammable flax, and the same, you can work out the same situation. One guy was in front, one guy was in back, and you can figure out who would be held liable in case of an accident. So now the Gemara asks a very interesting question. Rabba bar Noson asked a question from Ahuna. Someone who causes damage to his wife, bishash mishamita, while they're having intimate relations. Very interesting. Maho, what would be the din? Kevan the b'shus kavod, since he's doing with permission, he's being intimate with his wife and he's not violating anything. Potter, so we can't fault him if some damage happens. Or maybe, do we say, he should have been more careful. Amalei, so this was Rav Braba's question from Rav Huna. Amalei, so Rav Huna responded to Nesuhu, that is our Mishnah. The Mishnah says that if a chavias, a guy carrying a barrel, and a guy carrying a crossbeam, they're on opposite sides of the streets, and each one was going towards each other, since nobody is liable, each one has permission to go on the street. The street is open for everybody, and this one has permission to go on the street. Therefore, nobody is held liable. So same thing, if you're mazik your wife during Tashmish Hamita, you're not liable to pay. Amar Rava challenged that. Kalvachoyma. We know when the Torah describes somebody who's obligated to go into Golus, because he accidentally killed somebody. Torah says that two people entered a forest, and one fell from the tree and fell on the person who is underneath by accident, fell off a tree and fell on the person who is there. He's not. It's a shogeg, and yet he's obligated to go to galus. We hold him liable for something, not for killing somebody, but he's obligated to go to the Arei Mikla. So we say like this: the case of the forest, each one had a right to enter the forest. But the Torah considers the one who fell and killed somebody else by accident. Nasa commission. It's as if he went into the domain of somebody else, and you're liable. You're held accountable. So therefore, you should have been more careful, looking so that you don't fall off the tree. And you're obligated, in case you accidentally fell off the tree and killed somebody, you'd be obligated to go to galus. So the case when somebody has intimate relations with his wife, he had total permission to go into the domain of his friend. So he is actually in the domain of his wife. Like Kolshkein, certainly he should be held accountable. So Rava changes that, and Rava disagrees. And Rava says that you are held accountable. Our Mishnah, our Mishnah says when both have a right to be in a certain place, they are not held accountable. How do you square that off with the case of the forest, that the person who kills somebody falling off a tree is chayav to go to galus? Our Mishnah holds nobody accountable if you're entering into an area where everybody has a right to go. And says the Gemara, Hosam in our Mishnah, Tervayu kahadodi ninhu. They're both are going into the forest, right? They're both going on the street at the same time, and they're both energy walking towards each other causes the accident, and therefore, if the barrel got broken, the one with the crossbeam is not held liable. But over here, when someone has intimate relations with his wife, Ihu ka'avid masa, he's doing something, but she's not doing anything. So he's more responsible than she is because she's not coming towards him, he's coming towards her. And therefore, in that case, Rava would hold that you're held accountable for damaging your wife during Tashem Shamita. Says the Gemara, she doesn't do anything. Well, but the Pasuk says, when it comes to adultery, the Torah considers the woman as if she's doing something because she's chayav kares, she does something. And says the Gemara, really, she's not doing anything in the act of intimacy. But the Torah holds a woman liable for adultery because hanoel tavayu islu. Really, enjoyment of the intimacy is for the man and for the woman. But when it comes to the actual act, ihu maisa hu dekavin. It's only him that is doing the actual act, not her. Next Mishnah, next part. Hoyabal karisha. Amar Shlakish. Shlakish said a statement. Shtei paras b'reshus rabin. There were two cows in the reshus rabin. Achas ravutza. One just was crouching down in the reshus rabin, and it's not the right thing to do. Reshus rabin is a thoroughfare that no one has a right to block the reshus rabin. The achas, one animal, mahalachas, was walking, and what happened? Bota mahalachas b'ravutza. The one that was walking kicked the one that was lying on the floor, and damaged the one that was lying on the floor. But the one that was lying on the floor did something wrong in the Rishus Rabbah. So therefore, Patura, the one that kicked the walking animal, that kicked the lying animal, is not obligated to pay for any damages, because once the Ravutza did something wrong, anybody who does something wrong after that is not obligated to pay. Revutza b'mahaleches, but let's say the one that's crouching on the floor kicked the one that's walking, chayeves is obligated to pay, because of course it's like he kicked in it's keren, so it's the regular case of keren where Revutza kicked the one that was walking. Lema Messiah, let us bring a proof to what Rish Lakish just said, that if the Ravutza kicks the one that's lying down, kicks the one that's walking, it's chayav to pay, he's obligated. But the Brisa says, our Mishnah says, the one that's carrying the beam was first. The one that was carrying the barrel was second. And the barrel got broken by the cross beam. Potter, you're not obligated to pay. Bim omad bal koira, if the bal koira, the guy carrying the crossbeam stood, so he's considered like a roivetz, he's doing something wrong by blocking up the Rishus Rabim, chayev, then he's obligated to pay if the chavi is banged into, if the chavi is banged into the koira. So the same thing over here, Ravutza caused damage in the mahaleches, it's obligated to pay. Says the Gemara, ha-ha-ha, that's the raya. The kervutza b'mahaleches nami. It's similar to the ravutza, which is the balkoira doing a damage in the chavius, that's the balachavius that's walking. And the Mishnah says you're obligated to pay. So this Mishnah seems to be a clear proof to the idea of what Rish Lakish just said. Says the Gemara, but Tizbra, would you say that makes perfect sense? You trying to bring a proof to Rish Lakish? Loi Mistaya, not only is not a proof, Loi Mistaya, Loi Messiah, not only is it not a proof, it's even making it more difficult because we're saying Talmud the bottom. But Rish Lakish said that if the roots had kicked the mahaleches, then the revutza is obligated to pay. But let's say the mahaleches tripped over the revutza, tripped over the one that's lying on the ground, the one that's walking tripped over that, potter. He would be potter to pay because the mahalecha should be more careful seeing some things on the ground. V'hamasnis in our Mishnah also, the memela, that's not like the balkora stuck it into the chavias. It's actually the chavias banging into a stopped balkora, a stopped crossbeam. And the katani chayiv, and our Mishnah says, nevertheless, you're chayiv. So this Mishnah is not only not a proof to Rish Lakish, it would seem to be saying something different than Rish Lakish. And says the Gemara, so Masnis in our Mishnah, the Paske Leucha Kishilda. The reason why that Yechayev in all circumstances, because when the guy stopped with the crossbeam, he blocked up the entire road like a carcass. And therefore, the whole road was blocked over. There's no way to get around it. So therefore, even if the chavius bangs into the Balkora, and it happened by itself, the Balkora will be still obligated to pay. But in our case, in the case of Rish Lakish, going to Rava B'chad Gisa, the animal that's lying on the ground was only one side of the road. The animal that's walking, he could have walked around it. So if he walked right towards it and tripped and fell over the Ravutza, we fault the Mahalechas, and therefore the Ravutza is not obligated to pay. Let's take a look at the end of the Mishnah. Is that a raya to Rava? Is that a raya to Rish Lakish? The Sneeze the Messiah later Rish Lakish. The Ketani says the Mishnah. If the guy that's riding the chavis was first, and the guy that's carrying the beam was behind him, and the guy that carrying the barrel got broken by the guy carrying the crossbeam, he's chayav to pay. The amad bal chavis, but if the guy who's carrying the chavis stopped potter, then he's potter to pay. The hach over here is the kamahaleches brevusa dami. It's that the mahaleches, it's as if it's kicking the one that's lying down. Uktani potter, and it says it's potter because the crossbeam, the crossbeam, the guy carrying the barrel stopped, so he's the revutza. The guy walking with the crossbeam is walking, and he damaged the Baal Chavis, he's potter. So our Mishnah is a Mishnah seems to be a proof to Rish Lakish that the one that's walking damages the one that stopped, it would be potter. So the Gemara says not so fast. Our Mishnah is a little different than the story of Rish Lakish. Our Mishnah is talking about you're walking normally, and therefore, if the guy carrying the crossbeam banged into the Balachavis, who stopped, who shouldn't be blocking the Rishus Rabim, that's why you're potter. By the case of the walking animal, walking towards the animal that's lying down, he has permission to step around or to step over the animal that's lying down. To kick the animal that's on the ground, that the walking animal should not have permission to do. And that's what Rish Lakish is mechadish. He made this novelty that if two cows are in the Rishus Rabim and one's lying down and one's walking, if the one that's walking, not only if he banged into it, but if he kicked the one that's on the ground, he would be potter. So that's a big chiddush of Rish Lakish. So the Mishnah continues, Shnaim Shahoyim Ahalchim Rishus Rabim, two people are walking to Rishus Rabim, Echad Ratz. One of them is running, so he's doing something wrong. Ve'echad Mahalach, and somebody's walking normally. Or even if both of them are running, and they both damaged each other, Shneim Peturim, they're both not liable, because the Rishus Rabim has people running, walking, everybody has to look out for themselves and for each other, and therefore nobody's liable if they damaged each other. So as Mara says, Masnisim like Isa ben Yehuda. Our mission is not like Isa ben Yehuda. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Isa ben Yehuda says, Rotz Chayim. If one of them was running and one of them was walking normally, the one that was running is obligated to pay for damages, because it's doing something wrong. You're not supposed to run in the Rishus Rabin. But Isi would agree that on Friday afternoon, this is probably after 12, when people are running to get ready for Shabbos and doing whatever their needs are for Shabbos, if one of them is running, then because he's running with permission. In other words, on Friday afternoon, one has a certain right to be in a rush on in the street, and therefore if you damage somebody at that way, you're not liable to pay. Sort of like double parking on Central Avenue on Friday. So so our mission is not like Isa ben Yehuda, because our mission says the running is potter, and Rabbi Isa ben Yehuda says running is chayiv. Rabbi Yochanan said halacha Isa ben Yehuda. Despite the fact that our Mishnah does not agree with Isa ben Yehuda, the halacha is like Isa ben Yehuda, that during the weekdays it's not permitted to run, only on Friday. Says the Gemara, Mi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hakim. Did Rabbi Yochanan say something like this? Rabbi Yochanan said, halacha is our Mishnah. We always paskin like the anonymous Mishnah. Utnan, we learned in the Mishnah, Echad Ratz, if one of them was running, the Echad Mahalech, and one of them is walking, Oy Shahoyim Shneim Ratz, and over both of them were running, Peturim, they're potter. So it seems that you could run even during the weekdays. So how could Rabbi Yochanan paskin like Isa ben Yehuda that it's only permitted to run on Friday afternoon? And says the Gemara, Masnishin ber Shabbos ben Ishmash. Our Mishnah is actually talking about Friday afternoon, so it aligns itself with Isa ben Yehuda. Says the Gemara, Ummai, how do you know? The Mishnah gives another case if both of them are running their potter, right? So the Gemara says, Hasu lameli. Why do we need this? Why do we need this extra case? Sorry about that. The Gemara's question is, Hatu lameli. Why do you have to give me another case? One of them is running and one of them is walking this potter. Shneim rotzim, they're both running. You need to tell me that nobody's liable. If one of them is running and one of them is normal walking, they're not liable. Certainly, if both are running, they're not liable. So the way Rabbi Yochanan learned the Mishnah is telling you two things. It changes. If one of them is running and one of them is walking, is potter, like Isi ben Yehuda, ben Dvar Be'er Shabbos ben Hashmoshes. Only on Friday afternoon you're permitted to. One of them is permitted to run. If during the weekdays then one of them is running and one of them is walking, then the runner is chayiv, because during the weekdays you're not permitted to run. But shneim ratzim, if both of them are running during the weekdays, even the weekdays, they're both not liable since they're both doing something wrong. Okay, so that's how Rabbi Yochanan learned our Mishnah. Amamar, we learned before, Isi ben Yehuda ben Nishmash, Ber Shabbos ben Nishmash, Shu Patab Pnei Sharatz B'Rishus. Isi was agreed that Friday afternoon that you're not liable because you're running with permission. It says, the Gemara says, but Meir Shabbos Mai B'Shusika, why is a person permitted to run on Friday afternoon? Answers the Gemara to Rab Chanina, like Rab Chanina said. Rab Chanina said, we go to Amid Beis, Boyu v'neitze likras kala malchus. There's something that you have to go out to greet Kala the queen. So there's an inyan to, I guess what he's trying to say is to walk out on Friday afternoon. But also, even if it's a remez to how they used to be Mikabel Shabbos in the field, and it's real that you have to just go out and greet the Shabbos. So therefore, that's the reshus that your people are permitted to run in the street on Friday afternoon. Amila, others say Likra Shabbos Kala Malka. So they used to say, we're going to Shabbos, who is a bride, who's the queen. Okay, instead of saying when this is Kala, they added the word Shabbos. Rabbi Yanai, the Gemara tells us Misatef, he would wrap himself in a talis on Friday night, I guess, for the Friday of Kabbalah Shabbos, and that's how some people wear a talis Friday night. The Kohen, he would stand, the Alman, he would say, Bayichala, let the queen arrive, let the queen arrive. New Mishnah. The guy who's chopping wood in the Rishus Harabim, he's doing something wrong. And the splinter came out and it did damage the Rishus HaYachid, or the opposite. Rishus HaYachid v'hizik Rishus Harabim. He was chopping wood in his own property, and the splinters came out and it hit somebody in the Rishus Harabim. Or Rishus HaYachid v'hizik Rishus HaYachid, acher. Or if it went from chopping wood in one private domain, and the splinters went out and damaged somebody in the other private domain, chayev, you're obligated to pay. Says the Gemara, utzricha. Why do I need all three cases? That somebody who's chopping wood is responsible for any splinters that come out from his chopping. The Itana, if it would just say, that you're chopping wood in the Rishus HaYachid, and it does damage in the Rishus HaRabim, I'll say the reason why you're chayev, because mishum d'shchich rabim, you did something wrong by chopping wood, even in your own private front yard. You're right near the Rishus HaRabim. It could actually, fly out into the Rishus HaRabim, so you're negligent. But if you're chopping wood in the Rishus HaRabim and the splinters go out into the Rishus HaYachid, the loishchich rabim, where most likely not everybody's in front of their own front yard, or so therefore maybe most likely you weren't going to do a damage. So I might think you're not obligated to pay for any damages because it's considered not your fault. So therefore you have to pay even in that case. If it would just say Rishus HaRabim, Rishus HaYachid, it would say that if you did damage from you chopped wood in Rishus HaRabim, and the splinters went out to Rishus HaYachid, mishum demikar shloi b'shus If it would just say that, I would say the reason why you have to pay, because you have no right to chop wood in the Rishus HaRabim. It's not your place to do work. But if you did work in your own private yard and it ran out and it protruded out, shot out to the Rishus HaRabim, the Rishus Kavod, you did something which you're allowed to do, work in your own private domain, I would think that you're not obligated to pay. So that's why it had to say the first two cases. If you say just these two cases of because each one has a chiddush, and therefore the reason why you're obligated to pay is because either you should be concerned that the Rishus HaRabim has people walking there, and or if you're chopping in the Rishus HaRabim, you have no permission to chop in the Rishus HaRabim. But I would think you're not obligated to pay in the following case: Rishus HaYachid. You're chopping wood in your own yard, and it shot out into somebody else's yard and damaged somebody. The Lo Yishchika Rabim, it's not your fault. You didn't think that anybody's going to be in somebody in the yard at the time that you were chopping. Umikara, when you were chopping in your own yard, Bershus, you were doing it with permission. You have a right to start chopping in your own yard. I would think you're not obligated to pay in that case. Tzricha, that's why the Mishnah had to tell you in all cases when you're chopping wood in your yard, you have to be careful that something is going to shoot out and hit somebody. So therefore, you're obligated, you're held liable. Tana Rabbana, the rabbis taught, Hanichnas lechanusei shel nagar shaloi b'shus. Guy goes into, you can say an auto mechanic, but you can say a blacksmith's place of work, and he had no permission to go in. The nitza bekas, and he got damaged because something flew out as the blacksmith was chopping. The tafchal panim hit him in the face, umeis, and he died. Potter, you potter from Golis, because the guy, the blacksmith, didn't know that somebody walked into his shop. The im nichnas b'rishus, if he allowed the person to go in with permission, he told him, come inside. and then something happened, chayev, then the blacksmith is obligated to go to Gullus if he killed somebody. Wait, he's obligated. Doesn't say what. So the Gemara says, my chayev, what is he obligated to pay? Since the blacksmith gave permission for the stranger to come into his shop, he's chayev to pay damages, potter megolus, because he's potter megolus, because he's not obligated to go to Golos. He's chayev in damages, like everything except boishes, because boishes you have to really have intention to embarrass somebody. But nezek tzar ripi shevis boishes, because you're a pesheya, you allowed him to come into your property. By the way, in the beginning, says Rashi, in the first case where guy came in without permission, you're potter on the Dalet Dvarim, but you're chayev for the damage itself, because at the end of the day, Adam Hamazek is chayev even on oinus, even if it's not your fault. Totally not your fault, you're chayev to pay. But be that as it may, but in the case when he allowed the person to come into his shop, he's potter from Golus. Why? Because it's not similar to the case of Golus, going to Golus when you kill somebody, to the case that the Torah gives you. The Torah gives you when two people are come into a forest and one guy is on the tree and he falls off the tree and kills somebody. That's called going to Golus. Yar zerushus nichnas of zerushus nichnas. Both have the right to go into the forest. No one owns the forest, so they both have the right to be there. But here, actually, by the case of the blacksmith, the guest came in to the domain of the blacksmith. So therefore, that the Gemara wants to say that you won't be obligated to go to Golas. Rava said, Kal v'chayma, you certainly should be going to Golas. Because in the case of the forest, everybody came into the forest. You didn't have to ask permission from the other guy, so that everybody has a right to go into the forest on their own. It's as if you went in with the permission of your friend, and therefore you go to Gullus. It's as if you knew each other, each one is going to be there, and you go to Gullus. But the case of the blacksmith said, "Come into my shop." So like Koshkin, certainly if something happens, the blacksmith should go to Gullus. And says the Gemara, El Amarava, my potter megolas, why doesn't the blacksmith go to Gullus? It's not enough for Gullus. Gullus is only a total, complete accident. Any time the Rabbi Yosef when he said you don't go to Gullus, it's not that you're potter from Gullus. Mishum dahabile shoygig karav lemezid. It's not. It's a shoygig, but it's very close to being done on purpose. When the blacksmith invited the guest into his shop, even though the accident happened, but it was an accident that really he should be held. It's more closer to doing it on purpose. And Gullus is only when you do things by accident, not if you do it on purpose. So therefore, Gullus would not be enough of a kapara for the. So we just came up with a new rule called shoygig karav lemezid. When do you go to Gullus? It's only if you're an absolute shoygig. But if you're shoygig, a mistake, very close to being done on purpose, so then you don't go to Gullus. Masav Rava said, if the shliach bezin is giving malchus to somebody, and he was only supposed to give, let's say, 20 malchus, and he gave 21, so he gave him one extra, and the guy died, he goes to Gullus. Al Yodai. Over here, the shoygig karav lemezidu, it's really the guy who's giving the malchus should be keeping count. So it's a very shoygig, very close to mezid. He should have kept in mind that maybe by giving one more whack, one more whip, the person's going to die. Ukutani, and the Mishnah says, Hareze Goyli goes to Gullus. So we see that Gullus, you could go to Gullus even for a shoygig, karev lemezid. Omar Rav Shimi ben Nardoi says the Tamyim bin Yana. He made a mistake in counting. He made a mistake. He thought he was up to number 20, and really he was up to number 21. So he's a real shoygig. That's why he goes to Gullus. Tafechle Rava b'sandali. So Rava hit Rav Shimi from Nardoi with his sandal. Amalei atehu money. Is he the one to make the accounting? The guy that's whipping is not even counting, so he shouldn't have even made any mistake. They probably told him to stop. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Godel Shabbat Dayanim Kairi. Vasheni Moide, one of the elders of the Dayanim read the Psukim. The second one counts. Vashlishi, and the third of the Dayan, he says, Hakeu, hit him. So it's almost impossible to have made a mistake, the one that's doing the whipping, to make a mistake in the count number. And says the Gemara, in other words, the Dayan made the mistake. The one doing the counting made a mistake, but we fault. So he's not really, we would say he's an oinus, but we say to the guy that's doing the whipping, despite the Dayan is doing the counting, you should be counting yourself. And if you didn't count yourself, you are considered a shoygig, certainly not a shoygig karav l'mezid, and therefore you would go to Golos. Meisvei, come the last question. Azorik is Eben, Rishus Rabim, Kraman throws a stone to the Rishus Rabim. Hareg, and he killed somebody. He's a goyla, so he goes to Golos. But in this case, the Shai of Kavil Meziru is a very shoygig that's very close to a mezid. You're throwing a stone in Rishus Rabim, people are walking there, and you nevertheless, if you did it by mistake, you go to Golos. And since the boyale, the suki daiti Rishus Rabim shchikanasha, you should really think about that. There's many people in the Rishus Rabim, Ugutani, and the Mishnah says, Hareze Gaila, you go to Galas. So how could it be? You see, you go to Galas, even if you're a shoygate, Karav Lemezid, a mistake that's very close to being done on purpose. Amar Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzchak b'soiser is kaisli. Our Mishnah is talking about that. Mishnah is talking about that he was demolishing his wall. And therefore, it's a complete mistake that he accidentally hit somebody in the Rishus Rabim. Says the Gemara, before you demolish a wall, you should have checked around to see that nobody's walking in the Rishus Rabim. And says the Gemara, he was doing it at night. He was demolishing his wall at night. Says the Gemara, when you're demolishing a wall at night, right next to the Rishus Rabim, you should check to see if there's people walking there. So the Gemara says the case of that Mishnah, if it's a brisa, the case is b'soisa is koisli b'yom la'ashma. He's demolishing his wall during the daytime, right next to the outhouse where people go to the bathroom, and it accidentally hit the stones of the wall, ran into the outhouse and killed somebody. So hi ashbehechadami. What outhouses? What's the case of this kind of outhouse? If people are using that outhouse, that bathroom all the time, that's a purpose. You should have, and he would not go to Galas because you could always assume somebody is in the bathroom there, somebody is in the ashpa. If people never use that ashpa, honestly, it's not his fault that somebody happened to be there when he was demolishing his wall. Rav Papa said, it's a outhouse that's used only at nighttime. And it's not used during the daytime. And he was demolishing his wall during the daytime. Some people in a tight situation will happen to use that outhouse even during the daytime. So therefore, mezid lo yahava, you're not considered a mezid. It's not your fault because most people don't use it during the daytime. But onus nami lo yahava, but you're not considered an onus totally against your fault, and you're totally not negligent. The mikra v'yasef, he should think about that. Perhaps maybe just double check to see maybe somebody is there. So therefore, in that case, he's considered to be a real shoygig when he's knocking down the wall in the Rishus Rabim, and that's why you go to Golos. But a shoygig, karv l'mezid, that's what we're learning now. If someone is a shoygig, but it's very close to being done on purpose, then in that case, a Golos is not a sufficient kapara, and therefore you would not go to Golos. Okay, we'll continue with tomorrow's Daf Lamed Gimel.